Participants, dear experts, thank you for taking the time today to join us for the panel discussion on the repatriation of women and children from Syria in Central Asia, hosted by the Bulan Institute for Peace Innovations. The Bulan Institute is a research institute based in Geneva, Switzerland, with a regional office in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. Our mission is to conduct research, build a dialogue between stakeholders, and advocate for human rights and peace in Central Asia, Eurasia, and South Asia. With thousands of foreign nationals stranded in northeast Syria, there has been an important call to countries to repatriate their citizens to ensure their welfare. Central Asian states have taken the lead in repatriating and rehabilitating former ISIS members and their families. To help us understand why this is the case, we have invited 4 local experts who have an exceptional understanding on the repatriation policies towards former ISIS fighters and their affiliates. The focus of our discussion today will specifically be on the repatriation and rehabilitation programs in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. Our 4 experts today are Keneshbek Sainazarov, Yulia Denisenko, Nurlan Abdidayev, and Rustam Azizi. Thank you all for accepting our invitation and for being with us today. This is why we look to Central Asia as a model and as an example of the repatriation efforts. So how does this repatriation policy work in practice? Why do these states choose to repatriate their citizens in northeast Syria? How did they repatriate them, and how are their returnees being treated? How have the countries gone about de-radicalization and rehabilitation? We look forward to hearing the perspectives on these questions from our distinguished experts. We will follow the presentations of our speakers with a question and answer session. The experts will be asked the questions provided by our participants. If you have a question to ask, please let us know in the Zoom chat on the right-hand side of your screen. I would like to add that our session is currently being streamed on Facebook Live and will be recorded to share with our partners on social media and to be posted on our website. To all participants, please keep your microphone and cameras off for the entirety of the panel discussion. We will begin our discussion with insights from Mr. Keneshbek Sainazarov, the Central Asia Program Director for Search for Common Ground. Search for Common Ground is a global NGO devoted to building sustainable peace by developing dialogue and helping countries to de-radicalize youth. Mr. Sainazarov is based in Kyrgyzstan, but is currently in Nur Sultan. And as head of the Central Asia program, he will be able to provide us with a good regional overview of the repatriation processes conducted by different Central Asian states. Mr. Sainazarov, thank you so much for being here today and for helping us understand the situation in Central Asia. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the, thanks for the Bulan Institute of Peace Innovation and Mr. Moderator and distinguished panelists today. It is today, as we speak, we are discussing about the very important issue for the not only for the region of Central Asia, but for the entire world. As you know, after the defeat of ISIS, many, I mean, even before, many families were stranded and many societies were disturbed. And after the defeat of ISIS, many families and people's lives have been disturbed quite severely. Central Asia, in many other areas, usually the region goes out to learn new practices and experience. But in the case of the issue of rehabilitation and reintegration programs for the returnees, especially coming from the Middle East areas, the region has become one of the champions. And it was due to the concrete decision made by the leaders of 3 Central Asian countries, that is Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, to return their citizens back home. And the main focus was about the issues related with women and children. And I'm glad that in this whole discussion, the cornerstone of this dialogue and the whole decision was around the human rights of these individuals, and the government's approach to how the program should be, established. In many international platforms, like in UN or OSCE and many others, we always talk about the 2 distinct features, or the approaches that are considered quite efficient, effective, and successful. That is whole of society and whole of government. And when it comes to the issues of rehabilitation and reintegration programs in Central Asia, I can firmly state that the whole of society and whole of government approaches were applied. And in it, the leading role was played by the state institutions. The leading state institutions, including the president's offices in all 3 Central Asian countries. And thanks to their, I would say, the heroic will and decision, many individuals have been brought back, families have been reconnected, and now after more than 1.5 years of period, now we can say that the Central Asia is the region to propose quite an effective reintegration and rehabilitation program to the other regions of the world. The second important role was played by the civil society, and they played a critical role in especially the reintegration programs. And as you know, many of these individuals came back with a lot of fear and distrust, and there were a lot of stereotypes in the stigma in the society. But the civil society organizations have played a critical role to iron out these issues at the community level, and even going to the family level, so that these individuals are not, don't get into the stigma, or don't face all sorts of discrimination when they come back to their communities. And the third one I would also highlight is the role of academia and research institutes. And I think in it, the research institutes played also quite an active role, meaning that researching around the complex factors that are connected with the rehabilitation and reintegration programs. And we have a number of research reports that are coming from the region, including one of the very important publication coming from the Bulan Institute. And I think I really salute that. And then the fourth role is, I would say, I would highlight the role of the media, and the media has approached to this issue from the perspective of do no harm and conflict-sensitive journalism approach. And thanks to that approach, and we have many reports and live success stories of the concrete individuals from the region, how they have been, successfully reintegrated back to their families. So let me stop here so that we can deeply go into the details later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanazarov. That was a really interesting initial overview that helps us understand the context in which these repatriation processes took place and will allow our discussion to be more precise, specific, and insightful. So thank you very much for that. Now, our second speakers will be Ms. Yulia Denisenko, Director of the Asia Group Foundation, and Mr. Nurlan Abduldayev, Legal Officer from the Asia Group Foundation. Ms. Denisenko is an expert on countering extremism and de-radicalization with a deep understanding of Central Asia. Ms. Denisenko will first greet us in her role as Director of the Asia Group Foundation, and Mr. Abduldayev will follow with a presentation on the Zhushan operation in Kazakhstan. Thank you both for taking the time to be with us. Ms. Denisenko, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am very glad to participate in this event. Thanks to the Bulan Institute for the opportunity to meet new people and for you, good work. My English is very poor, so I would like to hand over to our legal officer, Nurlan Abduldayev. This is the first time I speak English in public. Now, Nurlan.
Thank you, Yulia. Hello, dear participants. We are so glad to hear and represent our public foundation to discuss our important topic. And we have to one more time thanks our organizers, especially Bulan Institute. So, and great thanks to Mr. Sanazarov, who highly opened our discussion topic. And in this framework, I would like to start our presentation regarding how repatriation and reintegration process has already started in Central Asia, and we will try to show about it. So let me share my screen. Is it possible, right?
Yes, sharing your screen should be possible. You should be able to share your screen. Let me just make sure. It should be the green button that you have. Do you need a permission?
Yeah, I know, but there is some notice you have to give a permission.
All right, so I've changed the function, so you should be able to share now.
Okay. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's okay now.
Yes, can you please switch to the presentation mode?
If not, you can continue.
Yes.
So dear colleague, our topic regarding rehabilitation and reintegration foreign terrorist fighters and their family from terrorist zone. As our previous speakers mentioned, Central Asia's countries, one of our leaders in this event, and so far around more than 900 family members were repatriated to countries. If you see the amount, most of them women and children. In this framework, we have to highlight our focus to the moment. It means every little thing's important here, especially in matter of assessing our psychological state. In this, it is necessary to take into account our difference in approach of Western and Muslim psychology. In this moment, I want to say during the reintegration process, all children don't know our regular poems and our regular study topics. At the same time, they know several surah in Arabic, so it means we have to focus our attention to this moment. Also, one very big moment, the children of fighters, most of them, they are already became unwitting witnesses to the crime. And it becomes for them normal process to watch, for example, father rapes 12-year-old slave or killing somebody. So that's why they had took many psychological disease. Here we also would like to give some couple of examples. For example, one Kazakh boy named Abil Mansur, who was returned from Syria, and one boy named Bagim from Urals. They said in Muaskar, in training center, as you know, most of instructors often rape their students. It means most of children were hazarded by instructors or elders. Also, from coming repatriation, we can see here what kind of injuries, disabilities, and diseases they already had. So we can see amount of injuries here about women and men. So now I would like to stand and draw your attention for following moments. Risk and needs assessment system for rehabilitation and repatriation from terrorist zone. Here we can see three most aspects which we faced during establishing this process. First one is systematic, then organizational, and personal. If consider section systematic risk, we can see the most problem is legal framework. It means each repatriating person has to come into our legislation. So it means before giving them a status of refugee or human trafficking witness, they have to go into the investigation. So it makes so big problem, and no one, almost all our legal systems and investigators, even courts, not recognize properly their problem, and everyone shows them as a terrorist. And another moment during resocialization, it is lack of methodological framework, social rejection, time limitation, and language barrier. The next section about organizational risk. Here we can see one of most problem, it is lack of subject matter experts due to lack of experience. So far, government institution cannot have appropriate experts. That's why our role, NGO community, to help them and communicate them. Another moment, due to lack of finance, government institution cannot provide appropriate medical care. Also, life sustaining activity, lack of monitoring system. Then next section about personal risk. This section actually belongs to our psychological specialist, and they exactly knows what actually it means. So we have to concentrate ourselves also in this section. And ending our presentation, we have to say about our foundation ready to help all kind of government institution, including all Central Asian government institution, because our task and all our efforts directed and covered all Central Asian region. And during our work, we every time don't stop our efforts to research and implement new methods how to resolve this kind of problem. And we would like to say we are open every time for our cooperation, and we will be online every time. So if you have another question, we are ready to answer. And thank you for your attention. Mr. Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abduldayev. That was a very fascinating presentation. It shows the important work that the Asia Group Foundation has been doing in the region. So we really appreciate the insight, and it really gave us a good understanding of the inner workings of the processes and operations that take place, notably in Kazakhstan, for this operation to be effective. Our next speaker is Rustam Azizi from Tajikistan. He is an expert on Islam, religious extremism, and de-radicalization processes. And he has directly helped the Tajik government to carry out the repatriation of operations there in place. He knows in detail how to prepare and implement repatriation processes and will be able to provide us with a unique perspective on the Central Asian experience. Mr. Azizi, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for being with us today. You have the floor.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, everyone can hear you, I believe, Mr.
So thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and Bulan Institute. And I would like to apologize and extremely sorry that maybe I can cough every time because I have a little bit got flu. Okay, so first of all, when we want to talk about the Tajik experience on rehabilitation and reintegration activities, so I would like to highlight that foreign fighters and their families traveled to Iraq and Syria to live with the so-called Islamic State from more than 80 countries, and citizens now they are returning to home countries, and state-organized repatriation have been conducted by Central Asian countries and Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. And different countries also, they exercise different approaches in their rehabilitation and reintegration processes. And for example, if Kazakhstan conveys de-radicalization process, so Tajikistan emphasizes pragmatic state-controlled protectionism, and Uzbekistan demonstrates organic social reobservation of repatriation. After years of demonization of citizens who had gone to Syria and Iraq, and now media has an important role to play in giving a human face to the issues of rehabilitation and reintegration. If we want to talk about the Tajik experience, so on April 30, 2019, a special flight from Baghdad to Dushanbe was organized by the government of the Republic of Tajikistan in collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iraq and Kuwait, internal affairs bodies of Iraq and Tajikistan, UNICEF, and other international organizations. In total, 84 children were brought to their homeland. And unlike other countries in the region, Tajikistan has a unique experience in returning its citizens. In the 1990s and early 2000s, many more refugees and persons displaced by the Tajik civil war were returned to Tajikistan than the recent number of returnees from Iraq. And based on this earlier experience, authorities were able to arrange the necessary financial, logistical, institutional, media, and integrational mechanisms, making it possible to quickly and successfully carry out the return operation of Tajik children from Iraq. And however, the experience we had through our civil war is not the same, but it gave us a possibility and capacity to overcome some problems. And nowadays, work continues on returning of citizens remaining in Iraq and also in Syria. And due to official information of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 575 women and children still based in Syria refugee camps. And on behalf of the government of Tajikistan, Zubaydullah Zubayzoda, the Tajiki ambassador to Kuwait and Iraq, traveled to Damascus, where he held talks with representatives of Bashar al-Assad government as well as the armed opposition. And in his interview to Radio Ozodi in October 2019, he conveyed that their return should be in near future. But unfortunately, these plans were not to be realized for the time being as a result of Turkish military operation in the northern Syria, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. But the Republic of Tajikistan actually has been challenged by the threat of extremism and terrorism since its independence. So during 2000, this threat intensified and transformed, and with official statistics showing an increase in extremist activity, both violent and non-violent, in the country. And with the emergence of Islamic State, these threats assumed new significance, actually, with propaganda of radical ideology and recruitment of new members, mainly taking place in digital space or while immigration abroad. Tajikistan developed and adopted the national strategy on countering extremism and terrorism for 2016 and 2020, similar to the strategies and action plans adopted in other countries of Central Asia. And these strategies mainly target two key tasks. First, prevention and counteraction, and the issue of rehabilitation of victims of radical ideologies, as well as their reintegration and resocialization, did not receive due attention. As a result, countries were not prepared to work with repatriants and returnees on their reintegration upon their return from zones of terrorist activity. And yet, while there was no specific scenario but the leadership of Tajikistan expressed political will concerning return and amnesty of those willing to renounce their past actions. And due to official data, since 2015, Tajikistan has introduced the automatic amnesty option for individuals who voluntarily return and report to authorities. And by April 2018, 111 people, 111, it's triple one actually, those who returned from the zones of terrorist activities were amnested. And by the September of 2019, their number exceeded 200. And it gave actually us the possibility to went back to normal life. And after returning, an interdepartmental working group was created under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the group was responsible for the repatriation processes. The state agencies that were directly involved were Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the State Committee for National Security, Ministry of Interior Affairs, the General Prosecutor Office, Committee for Religion, and others. Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health and Social Protection, and others. To coordinate the rehabilitation and integration process of returnees, the interdepartmental working group consists of 12 ministries and agencies, was established under the Executive Office of President of Republic of Tajikistan, and effective joint participation of these stakeholders has been a key success factor for implementation of different initiatives. And these 84 returned children actually belong to total 47 families, and only 3 of them currently are over 16 years old. And the mothers of most of the children, 33 in total, have been now they are in Baghdad prison. And the government of Tajikistan worked with the government of Iraq and UNICEF to secure permission from the mothers of children of ISIS fighters to return them to Tajikistan. For some children who were born in Syria and Iraq and had no birth certificate or other documents, the challenge was to establish their parentage. And for children who were born at home in Tajikistan and whose parents were known, such as many other children brought back to Tajikistan, the challenge was the question of legal actually guardianship of parental rights of their parents. And upon return, the children were housed in Sanatorium Harangon in the Warsaw area near Dushanbe. As one Tajiki psychologist working with the returnees stressed the need of every returned person must be considered individually because every person experiences different problems in many ways. After a week of working with children, psychologists conclude that despite of their time on battlefield, these children should be able to acclimate to living in safe society without constant threats or fear of violence. And working group for adoption of children was created under Tajikistan Ministry of Education. And there was an urgent need to put the children in school, since many had actually either not been to school or missed time out of school. And by July of 2020, according to the Ministry of Education, 79 of 84 returning children were placed in 17 orphanages and special boarding schools throughout the country. And the rationale for this decision was the belief that it will be easier for children to forget the horrors of the war if they do not have contacts with other children who also had similar experience. At the same time, guided by the principle of preserving families, siblings are not separated and they are sent to the same institution. 4 of returnees, 3 of whom are over 16 years old, and 1 child of young girl live in special hostel under the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection and are trained at the vocational schools. And importantly, here's the problem of actually going back to their families. And a social worker from the Ministry of Education stated that only relatives of 15 out of 47 families applied to receive their repatriated relatives. Some relatives don't want to accept returned children, and they're agreeing that they fear that these children may have negative effect on their own children. And also they don't want to attract the constant attention of law enforcement agencies and social services. And the financial side of the issue also very important. And this social worker also noted that according to their surveys, most parents don't want their children to go to the same school with children who have returned from Iraq. And it is their official survey. And unfortunately, there are currently no discussions about of actual transfers of children to close relatives, despite petition from some to take their children back to their homes. Only short visits have been allowed. One official stated that it is too early to return them to their relatives. Most of these children have lived in the horrors of war, and they still need constant monitoring by teachers and psychologists. Of course, over the time, after complete rehabilitation, all children will return to their loved ones. And but he also mentioned that families need to be examined first, and the fact that children current parents have not yet been officially deprived of their parental rights makes the adoption process currently legally impossible. So we cannot even talk about the adoption process, because their mothers are in prison and their parental rights with them. And if we are talking about the third part of issue, it is the stigma, media coverage, and the lack of NGO involvement. So since 2014, Tajik government has amnestied individuals, and like the children, I beg your pardon. Some of them, some of those who were amnestied, they faced such kind of problems of rehabilitation and reintegration. Due to that, the process of rehabilitation and reintegration of citizens who returned from the zone of terrorist activity nowadays is strictly controlled by the state, and Tajikistan has used a less formalized or systematic approach to rehabilitation and reintegration its citizens. And no a single NGO has received permission to conduct activities with this group of people. The only possible form of civil society participation has been a provision of material assistance and to children. And if we also talk about the stigma of people who were amnestied or self-returnees, the represented one of them informed us in his interview that he really faced the problems because he was a medical student, and he is trying continuously to continue his studies, medical, but until now, for 4 years, he didn't receive permission to continue his studies, for example. And another amnested citizen said that because he returned from Syria, the family of his brother's bride broke off the engagement, fearing of potential negative influence of his brother or increased attention from security services. And such kind of, most of them now live of the help of their relatives or work or low-paying jobs, and they cannot receive loans or social benefits for unemployment. So actually it was some problems, and a serious challenge in the Tajikistan rehabilitation and reintegration process has been the shortage of well-trained specialists to work with the repatriates and returnees, including psychologists, social workers, and even media workers. So not least, now actually, if we want to continue the successful rehabilitation process, we need to cooperate and to increase the level of involvement of NGOs and civil society in such kind of activities, because yes, it's very successful when state provides very well organized control, but the increase of involvement of civil society will give us possibility to make the process more successful, and it will be actually more integrated. And if you, here I will stop, and if you want to ask some question about some experience or specific data, I am completely at your service. So I will stop here, and once again, thank you everybody for your attention. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Razizi. That was really fascinating, because Tajikistan is a country we rarely get to hear from in the international media, and it is important to hear the issues from that perspective. As well, the experience is really fascinating when you consider that many Western countries can't repatriate far smaller numbers of people. However, Tajikistan has a very coordinated and effective process, which is really fascinating. We will move forward to our question and answer session. As we said before, these questions were asked from our participants in the Zoom chat. Our first question is for Mr. Keneshbek Sainazarov, and the question is, so during the repatriation processes of Central Asian countries, what kind of roles were played by international actors such as the United States, maybe Russia, UNICEF, or other European countries? Did they try to influence the decision-making process or the organizational processes or the logistics? Did they help contribute or try to pressure the governments?
Thank you for the question. No, I don't think so. I think the decision was made by the leaders of these three nations unilaterally, and the international entities and institutions have come to support everything with all the resources they have. And especially I would highlight the role of three particular institutions: the UN system, including the UNICEF, and in all these programs, in all these countries, they are really championing, especially when it comes to the children's rights, and they are playing a very, very critical role. The second is the neighbor countries, including, as you mentioned, about Russia. We also have already quite a bit of experience from Russia as well, when they have returned their own citizens back in 2018. And the third one is the role of the US government, and who has even arranged some of the most of the flights of these individuals back home. So it was truly an international effort to make this happen and work. And again, I would like to re-emphasize the role of the leaders of these three nations in Central Asia and the state institutions, who played a very active role in welcoming their own citizens back home. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very interesting answer. So basically, the United States helped organize flights. That's surprising and interesting. We know that the U.S. supports the repatriation process, so there's definitely a lot there. Our second question goes to Mr. Abduldayev. Where are the repatriated women that were brought back to Kazakhstan? Where are they living now? Have they found jobs? Can we say they've returned to something resembling normal lives? Has there been any information from the Kazakh government on the accommodation of women in their society? And what kind of financial and social assistance are they receiving?
Because she is especially in charge for this process. Just 1 second.
Слышно. Продолжайте. Please continue.
Юлия, можете ответить на вопрос? Вот возвращенцы сейчас, как они проживают?
Где сейчас и какую работу с ними ведут, да?
Да.
Спасибо за вопрос. Я буду отвечать на русском, как Нурлан уже пояснил. Потом будет перевод. Но все возвращенцы, как вы знаете, проходят время карантина в Казахстане. Это было месяц, плюс-минус, там несколько дней. После этого они возвращаются по месту своего прежнего проживания в регионы Казахстана, где с ними работают и государственные органы, и неправительственные организации. В данном случае это центры «Шанс» и другие. которые ведут с ним процесс реабилитации. Что касается пандемии, всех этот вопрос больше интересует, то сейчас занятия ведутся онлайн, в том числе с привлечением психологов именно по этнопсихологии, психологов, которые очень хорошо разбираются в ментальности мусульман.
So regarding returning people, at the beginning they had a quarantine period around 1 month, then they returned their family. Then currently government institution and NGO in cooperation, they conducting all kind of reintegration process due to pandemic process. Now all efforts and events conducting by online.
Конечно, с ними ведется еще и социальная работа, их трудоустраивают, обеспечивают новыми документами, если они были утеряны. Ведется работа по возвращению в школу детей, курсы различные, профессиональные, да, обустройство на работу. Но единственное, чего, на мой взгляд, не хватает всему Центральноазиатскому региону и ряду других, которые единицы забрали своих детей на родину из зон конфликта в Сирии и Ираке, это работа с семьями. Я бы все-таки настаивала, вот Кинешбек тоже это отмечал в своем выступлении, настаивала бы, чтобы основной движущей силой в процессе реабилитации была семья, и в первую очередь нам нужно работать с семьей, членов семей делать членами команды по реабилитации.
Certainly from government institution directly providing helps regarding returns to schools and giving them official documents if they lost and other resocialization events, but in this framework I would like to focus on our attention to work more deeply with each family and focus in our psychological moments and social moments, and deeply involve to this process family members, because without their help it is almost impossible, and it will be more effectively to work within cooperation with family members.
All right, well, thank you very much for those answers. Spasiba, Yulia, and thank you, Nurlan. That's a really interesting answer, and it's interesting how the process has had to change with a quarantine to bring back for COVID and had to go online. So our next question then will be a more general question that we've received. It is, so in all three countries that we're talking about, and in Central Asia generally, there was the big issue of, and you've all mentioned stigma, but public opinion was initially against repatriation, right? Probably. And how was that overcome? How did the government make some communication? Was there a media role in this? How ultimately was the public opinion deficit overcome in these countries?
So general question? Yeah. Can I answer?
Yes, absolutely. It would be very interesting to have your perspective.
So if we are talking about stigma and like this, you know, for last 5 years, media, both official and non-official, were demonizing them, and we're talking that really they are combatants, they are threat for our security, etc. And public opinion, even now, actually doesn't support the idea of their repatriation. But there was political will, the strong political will in all three countries, especially in Tajikistan, when the president of the Republic actually said that they are our citizen, and we are ready to accept them even if they commit crimes, etc. It is their homeland, and it's their country. And you know, in all three countries, the main role was in political will. And you know, now media in some countries trying actually turned 180 degree, and for 5 years they were saying such kind of horrors and threatening their that they are actually a threat for national security, they are terrorists, etc. They are not good citizens, they are actually betrayed the country, betrayed the homeland, etc. And now turned that, oh, okay, they are victims. So, you know, we must find such kind of middle way and try to show the human face of repatriation and de-radicalization and reintegration processes. Try to focus on human stories via storytelling of experience of those people who were involved in such kind of activities, and not to blame them and not to show that, okay, all of them, they are victims, because between them there are some people who really committed crimes and until now follow radical ideology. However, we are trying to say about their successful de-radicalization. Actually, I personally don't believe that such kind of successful de-radicalization is possible in such kind of short period of time. So, and we should not focus on de-radicalization issues at all, because de-radicalization is in our mind, and we cannot check for sure if he or she is de-radicalized or not. So focusing on our reintegration issues or rehabilitation issues on de-radicalization, from my point of view, it is not the best way. We have to focus on their social rehabilitation, and if he or she can find good jobs, can for example, find a possibility to realize his or her needs, it will be the best example for successful reintegration and rehabilitation. And actually, I would like to ask all experts, all participants, not to focus only on the radicalization issue, because we are not sure if it is possible even or not. We don't have facts of successful de-radicalization, even single. So that's why we have to focus on their social rehabilitation first of all, and other steps maybe follow it after their successful social rehabilitation. And so, thank you.
That's a really fascinating answer. Sorry if I'm cutting in, but this idea of de-radicalization is very present in the Western mentality towards this issue. And so that's a really interesting new approach. I did want to follow up with you though. Where does, you mentioned the support from the president, but where does this political will come from? Because in many other countries, notably in the West, and we'll keep making mention to them, there isn't this political will. And where did it come from within the Tajik government or the Tajik political community?
It came from our government and from president. And after, you know, in our countries, the political will is very strong. So if, for example, government declared that they should be back, so they should return to homeland, society step by step will accept it, because it's very important to have political support of issue. and social support or support on community level in our countries came after political will. So that's why our president declared that they are our citizen and they should return. So it is the strong argument against any other arguments. So it is our reality. It's the reality of our politics. So that's why maybe in some Western countries the social aspect or community opinion is about the political will. That's why it makes the process of returning or rehabilitation is impossible or create some problems for it. So in here, I remember the phrase used by one of our experts. So sometimes we need such kind of creative dictatorship. So that's why political will is very important it's in such kind of issue, and it's our reality. I don't know if it's possible in Western countries, but it was possible in 3 Central Asian countries, as we mentioned before and as other speakers mentioned.
Well, that's really fascinating what you said, because I think we're finding a very big difference in what has driven these policies in different countries. So here, I'll go back to Kenishbek, and as Mr. Azizi has just mentioned, do you think that many countries are looking to the example of Central Asia and are being inspired or motivated to shift their approach? Probably, I would say, first and foremost, the other Central Asian countries, notably that haven't been in this conversation, Turkmenistan and Kyrgyzstan. Is there a shift? Are there countries looking at this approach and saying, maybe we can make this work?
Indeed, Cooper. From what I see today, now in Balkans, they have their own returnees, and there is a rehabilitation and reintegration program just starting there in that region, and they get a lot of insights and experience from the Central Asian countries, and in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, I was I observed the discussions around, I would say, 3 issues that are quite pertinent when it comes to having an effective rehabilitation and reintegration programs. One is an institutional barrier. So now, based on the experience of especially Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, it is very obvious and quite convincing that the institutions of psychologists, social workers, and social and social pedagogues, 3 are quite play an important role once these individuals complete their rehabilitation program. So all the countries are questioning their own infrastructure, whether they have sufficient resources to support this kind of need. At least I've seen the debates in 2 countries. And even today, like in Kyrgyzstan, in many occasions when it comes to rehabilitation programs, now we talk about the apply that to self-returnees, or soon to become other people or individuals who are serving their term in the prisons for extremism and other charges, and they will be soon finishing their terms. So the issue of reintegration of such individuals back in the communities is very, very important one, you know, and that is, I think, quite an important highlight. I think what we can learn from the country's experience.
So this concludes our question and answer session and hence our panel discussion today. I would like to thank Mr. Sainazarov, Ms. Denisenko, Mr. Abdeldaev, and Mr. Azizi for all of their professional insights and for having taken the time to join us in our discussion today. Your perspectives were really appreciated and certainly gave us a lot to think about. I would also like to thank our participants for taking the time to join us and for taking the time to engage with our experts. We are looking forward to hosting more of these discussions, so stay tuned to the Bulan Institute. Thank you all for your questions and for your engagements and for joining the Bulan Institute and in having your interest in these important issues. If you like this dialogue, please inform your friends and partners and don't hesitate to reach out to us. In the meantime, I wish you all a wonderful day wherever you may be and look forward to hosting events with you in the future.